Nashville Public Radio serves Middle Tennessee in many ways, every day, including through this podcast. You can support it by leaving a review or rating, by telling a friend about it, or by contributing at WPLN.org/give.
This is the Nash Villager Podcast. It's December 16th, 2025. On this day in 1900, an organization called the National Civic Federation was formed. It was built as a group that aimed to bring workers and their industrial employers together to work towards common goals. The turn of the 20th century was a time of incredible upheaval in the workplace. Blue-collar employees were revolting against dangerous working conditions, 50 or 60-hour work weeks, and a system that gave them very few rights. At the same time, the federal government was about a decade into a crackdown on the outsized amount of power that big industrial firms had in the United States. The National Civic Foundation drew its membership from a combination of union leaders, political figures, and business owners. It served as an arbitrator in labor disputes, and its influence pushed businesses to agree to collective bargaining agreements rather than staying dead set on crushing and eliminating unions. It was a reforming organization, but with a quite conservative mindset. While some union leaders participated in the NCF, others considered it a club for sellouts. The NCF was quite concerned with making sure none of its reforms veered into what anyone might describe as socialism, and its policy stances tended to align more with big business than the people who worked for those companies. I'm Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee with historical context from Nashville Public Radio, WPLN News. When it comes to labor relations in Tennessee, right now all eyes are on the Volkswagen plant down in Chattanooga. It's been more than a year and a half now since workers there voted to join the United Auto Workers. That was a really big deal. It was the first Southern vehicle plant outside the ones owned by the nation's so-called Big Three automakers to organize. The UAW called it a historic breakthrough. That was April of last year. That September, the union sat down with VW at the bargaining table for the first time, and they still haven't agreed on a contract. The company made what it called a last, best, and final offer this September, roughly a year after negotiations began. The union rejected it and accused the company of breaking negotiating rules. At the end of October, members of the union voted to authorize a strike if its leaders decide it comes to that. And later today, they're scheduled to have a union meeting to update workers on where things stand. And all of this was happening while, of course, automakers were in the news as an industry that stands to be particularly affected by the nation's trade war. VW in particular reported losing $1.5 billion in the third quarter. Well, with that long negotiation and everything else that's going on, some folks are out of patience. This month, a petition began circulating to decertify the UAW at the Chattanooga factory. In other words, leave the union, take the deal that VW offered. The URL for the petition's website puts it quite plainly. It's called takeyourvwraise.com. In giant letters, the site characterizes the UAW's refusal to agree to the company's offer as a message to workers to, quote, risk your job, health care, and leased vehicle to strike without pay. The site doesn't show how many people have signed on. Attorneys for the petition's organizers tell the Chattanooga Times-Free Press that a few dozen workers are leading the push to dissolve the union. About 3,200 employees are represented by the UAW at that factory. To trigger a decertification vote, the petition would need to gather more than 950 signatures. In just a few minutes, another installment of The Debt, the latest investigation from WPLN News and the Tennessee Lookout. That's coming up after the newscast.
Tennessee's legislature has passed a record-breaking number of anti-LGBTQ laws. I'm Mariana Baca-Yao, and as WPLN's Power and Equity reporter, I focus not only on how marginalized communities contend with those new laws, but how they come together in spite of them.
I think what gives me hope is that someone like you is covering this. Because if the overwhelming narrative is one of defeat, how can we have hope?
Listen here on 90.3 WPLN News.
Here's the latest from WPLN News. The ongoing controversy over the use of surveillance will be taken up by Nashville's Metro Council tonight. This time it's over an agreement between the city and the Nashville Downtown Partnership. It details the partnership's planned use of funds from a state public safety grant, some of which would be used for video surveillance and an armored rescue vehicle for police. At the council's last meeting, the legislation was deferred following testimony from some opponents. Here's Sabina Moyadeen.
What is this? Even as a crime rate in Nashville is going down, why would we have a $15 million grant so we can invest in high-tech toys to keep certain communities safe at the expense of the rest of us?
Moyadeen raised concerns over the federal government's usage of surveillance technology in making immigration arrests, as well as prior opposition to other surveillance technology that the city has considered, such as license plate readers and the Fusus video network. The mayor calls this agreement an important arrangement for overall downtown safety. The Tennessee Supreme Court has dismissed a challenge to the redrawing of a state Senate voting district. The justices also upheld a lower court's decision that redrawing maps for the state House was constitutional. This is the latest in a battle over redistricting maps approved by state lawmakers in 2022. Tennessee voters sued the state in two different cases, both claiming the new maps violate the state constitution. The Senate suit was brought by a Nashville voter over the confusion of renumbering districts. The House suit was filed by three voters who felt the new maps divide more counties than necessary. The state's justices say the plaintiffs could not prove they were injured by the redrawn districts. Tennessee has a law on the books guaranteeing access to in vitro fertilization and birth control. It passed out of the State House last year. WPLN's health reporter Catherine Sweeney tells us the bill's supporters think they could have a fight ahead of them.
Study after study has shown that after state abortion bans go into effect, residents get confused about what reproductive care is still available. Callie Nowers heads up the advocacy nonprofit Awake Tennessee. She said that's why the state needed the new law, to make it abundantly clear that IVF and contraceptives are legal in Tennessee. That's why the organization supported this pitch. But now,
we are preparing for significant backlash next session, which starts in about a month. They made it clear that they see this law as something that needs to be reversed and or weakened.
She's talking about critics in the General Assembly. The measure flew under the radar during the committee process, but it became divisive ahead of the last major votes. Here are some of the complaints from the House floor about IVF.
It creates a statutory right to create and destroy human embryos without qualification, limitation, or restriction. It does not treat a human embryo as a person.
This bill would make genetic testing, which is used to weed out embryos that might have some disability, it makes that a right.
Other sticking points are related to certain kinds of birth control.
We are creating, if we pass this bill, a right to use of the morning after pill. We are limiting and making it difficult for this body to go back later and address that specific issue.
But that's the point, according to supporters like Nowers.
I'm a proud IVF mom, and for families like mine, this legislation isn't abstract. It safeguards the very medical tools that allowed me and thousands of other Tennesseans to build our families. And it protects the contraceptive methods that people rely on to make informed decisions about their futures and lead dignified lives.
Catherine Sweeney, WPLN News.
Vanderbilt University is pausing a program to help first-year students from diverse backgrounds acclimate to campus. The invitation-based program is not taking new students for the 2026 school year, according to an internal email obtained by the campus newspaper, the Vanderbilt Hustler. Pressure on the program, called Mosaic, was attributed to a memo from the Trump administration condemning diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives at schools that receive federal funding. A data breach involving Blue Cross Blue Shield has spurred a wave of lawsuits. The data includes names, social security numbers, medical details, and insurance information of some members in Tennessee. The attack reportedly ran from October of last year to January of this year, but only recently became public. Conduent, a vendor that's tied to the breach, says that's because it just concluded a thorough review of the affected files. The company sent a letter to Blue Cross Blue Shield patients saying it's not aware of any attempted misuse of patient data. People affected are being offered 2 years of free credit monitoring and other steps to deal with possible identity theft. The world's largest zinc smelting company is planning a $7 billion project in Middle Tennessee. Korea Zinc is building new headquarters in Clarksville as it plans operations in the area. WPLN's Caroline Eggers reports.
Mining is the process of extracting minerals, ores, and other materials from the earth, while smelting is the process of taking metal out of rock through heating. Korea Zinc plans to do both. In Clarksville, they're buying what is the only zinc smelter in the U.S. from a company called Nurstar. It's also buying the only 2 zinc mines in Middle Tennessee. Korea Zinc will then build its own smelting complex in Clarksville. Construction could start next year, and operations may begin as soon as 2029. That facility may produce about 500,000 tons of metals each year, including 300,000 tons of zinc and about 5,000 tons of rare earth metals. The U.S. government will fund much of the project as part of a bid to reduce the nation's imports from China. Korea Zinc says their materials can be used in chips for electronics, defense, and aerospace. Caroline Eggers, WPLN News.
Former District Attorney General Tommy Thompson died last week. He was 78 years old. Thompson began serving the 15th Judicial District, which includes Trousdale, Jackson, and Wilson counties, in 1977. Holding the office for more than 4 decades, he became one of the state's longest-serving district attorneys before retiring 4 years ago. You'll find more news anytime at WPLN.org. The state's chronic underfunding of its only HBCU, Tennessee State University, has had very real consequences. And for many decades, one of the most visible consequences was its buildings. It was the dilapidated dormitories that led a TSU instructor to file a civil rights lawsuit in the late 1960s. But when that didn't solve the problem, students took matters into their own hands. Reporters Emily Seiner and Camelia Burris tell this history in our new special called The Debt. Here's an excerpt.
By 1990, the problems with TSU's buildings were not fixed. Students said the dorms were moldy and infested, so was the student center.
So we had an old campus center, dusty, leaking, roaches, rats, all kind of stuff.
This is Antonio Terry. He was involved in student leadership at TSU. The student government decided to take action. They led an occupation of the president's office.
Student government took over the building, locked it down. So the next day, the president couldn't get in the building. And they're like, what the hell is going on?
Antonio Terry wasn't one of the leaders of the protest, but he says he suggested where the students should go next. They should take over TSU's downtown campus, the building that used to be the site of UT Nashville.
I said, look, the reason why TSU is in this situation in the beginning is because of UT Nashville. So why don't we go take over that campus and have our protest? We marched from TSU campus all the way down 8th Avenue, all the way down to the downtown campus, singing "We Shall Overcome" like Martin Luther King.
The 5-mile trek ended up with a sit-in at TSU's downtown campus.
It was a list of items we wanted, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way down the line.
I think I can safely say that we'll still be here until our rights are obtained.
For 14 days, students stayed inside the Avon Williams building downtown.
Secretaries and other university employees trying to work around the students occupying their offices this morning with limited success.
We're doing a lot of whistling, a lot of dancing, a lot of holding hands, and a lot of praying together.
The community leaders told the demonstrators that they are behind them for as long as it takes to improve conditions at the university.
We are talking about freedom and justice for Tennessee State University, which has been long overdue.
The state is who is to really blame.
Eventually, some of the students stopped eating. It became a hunger strike. And if the public wasn't paying attention before, they were now.
The news people came in and they went into the rooms and they saw the asbestos. They filmed it and showed it. The public is looking at it on the news like, these students not lying. Look at this. How can they live in this kind of condition? And that's what won the public over.
For the first time, TSU student leaders had progress to report to weary demonstrators.
Hot water in dormitories, blinking electricity in particular dormitories, non-working showers in the dormitories.
All these problems will be worked on by next week, according to an apparent agreement with the university's president.
It was students saying, we're willing to starve ourselves for public attention until you give us more funding.
Yeah, it really was remarkable. And what was also remarkable was just how quickly it worked. Within a week, the State Building Commission met to discuss new projects at TSU, and the governor showed up, which was apparently unusual. And he wanted to make sure that TSU's projects happen quickly. And this would eventually lead to tens of millions of dollars in additional funding.
Emily Seiner and Camelia Burris are co-producers of The Debt, about the fight for fair funding at TSU. You can find the whole story at WPLN.org/thedebt. We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday, so subscribe in your favorite podcasting app to make sure you never miss an episode. And if you like this, you'll probably enjoy the Nashvillager newsletter, too. You'll get perspective from more of my colleagues at Nashville Public Radio and links to the stories we're following. Sign up for those daily emails at WPLN.org/Nashvillager. Thanks so much for listening. Let's make this day a good one, and we'll catch back up tomorrow.